No one's afraid of trans people. No one has a problem with people who are trans, who are, human beings deserving of respect and dignity and kindness like everybody else. He's just talking about sports.
Yes.
And he's saying we shouldn't have 6'4" dudes competing against women in swimming or basketball or anything else because it's unfair. And I feel badly for so many of these women who grew up thinking, oh, the pro-women party is the left and the Democrats, and they're the feminists, and they're the ones that really care about us. They're abandoning you. The Democrat Party has abandoned you. They won't even admit that there's anything particularly special about you. In fact, being a woman is effectively a superficial physical costume that one can don, one can put on and take off at will.
Mentioning Trump, by the way, Buck. Tomorrow, Trump is going to be out at Bedminster. Yesterday, he was in Washington, D.C., I believe for the first time since he left Washington, D.C., and he has an intuitive sense of what connects with his base and what connects with his audience. And it's not a surprise because the same arguments we've been making on this show that Democrats have gone insane. And one way to point out how they have gone insane is on the transgender-related issues, particularly as they pertain to sports. And Trump, we've said this a lot, and Trump is scheduled to join us from Bedminster right now on Friday, live on the program.
I think we're kind of joining Trump, considering we're going to be at Bedminster, but yeah.
Well, that might be a better way to phrase it, but it's our show, so he's joining us on
Fair
the show.
point.
We will be joining him at his golf course, so we're mutually joining together. Trump's sense of humor always has not been able to register with a lot of the media that cover him. And yesterday we played the Matt Gaetz.
Can we he's hilarious, and they have no sense of humor is the problem.
Well, we played the Matt Gaetz yesterday where he said, be offended, and it was legitimately hysterical about the people who are protesting all the time.
The follow-up was great,
yes,
too.
It was phenomenal. So Trump is speaking yesterday, and Trump is so insane that he said, hey, maybe we shouldn't let men play in women's sports. Listen to this.
And by the way, we should not allow men to play in women's sports.
I think 90% of Americans agree with him. And then he went on to say, and this is very funny, that he could be the greatest women's basketball coach in history. How? Listen to Donald Trump.
And I'll tell you what, if I were ever, I'd be the greatest women's basketball coach in history. Because I don't like LeBron James. I like Michael Jordan much better. But I'd go up to LeBron James. It doesn't matter. I'd say, LeBron, did you ever have any desire to be a woman? Because what I'd love you to do is star on my team that I'm building up. I will have the greatest team in history. They'll never lose. Nobody will come within 70 points of this team.
It's accurate. It's funny, Buck. This got your friend Yamiche was really upset.
Just to be clear, I've never even met Yamiche. I just know how to pronounce her name.
You know how to pronounce her name. I had no idea how to pronounce her name. I'll be quite honest. So I had to ask Buck, who's much better at pronunciations than I am. Yamiche Alcindor decided that this was, you just heard the jokes. You just heard Trump kind of mocking the ridiculousness of
Did
transgender
she say it was like
athletics.
Literally violence? I'm just wondering. Did
she said, close, Buck, very close. She said this was transphobic language that Donald Trump used. This is their argument. Listen.
Cultural issues were very popular in that room. Former President Trump went on a long rant about transgender Americans, and he used transphobic language. In particular, he was talking about transgender women competing in sports and said that they were men trying to compete against women, which of course is not the right way to talk about that
All right,
issue.
I just want to stop that. How else would you talk about men competing in women's athletics other than to say these are men competing in women's athletics?
This is something that the left loves to do. They attach phobia to terms. Now, phobia is an irrational fear of something.
Yes.
No one is afraid of Trump's not afraid of trans people, right? Arachnophobia, fear of spiders, right? Hydrophobia, fear of water, whatever, right? People can come up with all these things. No one's afraid of trans people. No one has a problem with people who are trans, who are, human beings deserving of respect and dignity and kindness like everybody else. He's just talking about sports.
Yes.
And he's saying we shouldn't have 6'4" dudes competing against women in swimming or basketball or anything else because it's unfair. And I feel badly for so many of these women who grew up thinking, oh, the pro-women party is the left and the Democrats, and they're the feminists, and they're the ones that really care about us. They're abandoning you. The Democrat Party has abandoned you. They won't even admit that there's anything particularly special about you. In fact, being a woman is effectively a superficial physical costume that one can don, one can put on and take off at will. That's effectively what they've decided being a woman is.
Buck, you rowed in college at Amherst.
I would have been the
greatest
best female rower and I was not let's be very clear, because if anyone from my rowing team is listening, I was not a very good rower. I was better at other sports. I just wanted to try to be less fat in college. So I was a decent enough high school athlete. I would have crushed it, man. You would have been
the best women's rower.
I would have been an all-American female rower, yes. No question. I mean, and by the way, that's based on your erg score. I mean,
yes.
It's like a track meet where they can do they time you. You do a 500-meter, 1,000-meter, 2,000-meter 5K, and they'll do times on the erg machine, the rowing machine. I would have been like a national. By the way, that's not even, any male rower would have been at the top. I mean, if you could compete at the college level as a man, you would have been a top female rower as a man. I don't even know how to say that.
Yeah, which is the point of anybody who understands athletics. So Trump intuitively understands what the American public thinks on many issues. And I just would echo what we said earlier. If you think men can get pregnant, and if you believe that gender is basically a construct and you can, to your point, just try on whatever gender you want to try on at any given point in time, you're a Democrat. And the vast majority of the American public, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, everyone rejects overwhelmingly this idea, except Yamashita out there is arguing this is transphobia to say, hey, men should compete against men and women should compete against women.
You're pretty close with Yamiche, by the way. Pretty close. It was good. You were right there. You're right on the edge.
I even wrote down the pronunciation here, and I can't even read my own pronunciation.
And the other area you've heard, it's a little bit quieter on this issue now, but on the trans agenda as it pertains to indoctrination of children in schools, Libs of TikTok, the account that's out there,
yes,
keeps on finding all of these teachers and, youth counselors who are saying, or even just parents too are saying, my child came out as trans at age 4 or whatever the case may be. There are a lot of Americans, whether it's on the issue of trans competition in sports or on trans indoctrination for kids, they may not be that vocal about it because they don't want the psycho left to come after them.
Yes.
But when they have an opportunity to vote based upon candidates who either embrace this stuff or recognize it as crazy and destructive, I think there's going to be a huge silent majority effect here against the insanity, quite honestly,
I think
of
you're
the left
right
on these issues. I think people are going to say this. It is a huge part. Yes, the economy, fine. That's first and foremost. But a very big chunk, I think, of the swing in Hispanic sentiment right now is, what do you mean we can't have men and women as men and women, and we're just going to pretend that that's the same thing or different things when we decide it's different only, and that children as young as kindergarten should be exposed to gender identity ideology. I think people realize it's pretty crazy.